There's a crude joke that goes like this. Opinions are like a-holes. Everybody has one. All right. Now, everyone is entitled to their own opinion, right? We've all heard that expression. In other words, everyone has a different worldview. As many humans as there are that many worldviews by definition. But they can't all be true. And some worldviews, by definition, must be closer to the truth than others. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Saturday Show. Well, I'm going to call it STW Saturday Show, Save the World Saturday Show. Normally, this channel is dedicated to Armenia, all things Christian, and all things humane and humanity. But on Saturdays, I am speculating and exploring some ideas that, to be honest, I have some conclusions or thoughts that have occurred to me as a result of my research into the Armenian genocide. That, well, not just the Armenian genocide. Some of these thoughts date much further back. In fact, let me give you a little of my background. I am a Hollywood producer. I've won an Emmy. News producing, and so I have a news and entertainment background, but I also have, I would say, an above average understanding of theology, in particular Christian theology, an above average understanding of the sciences, an above average understanding of philosophy, an above average understanding of history. And another, I'd just say above average, I'd say slightly more than 50% of people. Right? People generally are fairly ignorant, and I'm talking about in totality. So when I say above average, humans on the planet. So I'm not claiming to be an expert in anything. In fact, I'm not an expert in anything. But I'm fairly educated and self-educated in a lot of these areas because of my own personal interest. Read lots of books, done some research, interviewed people. So that being said, what I have to say here is essentially an assessment based on my understanding of all those different areas. Now, save the world seems to be a common theme. Everybody wants to save the world. At every awards show, people get up there and want to save the planet, or thank God, and want to do good and have virtuous causes, and everybody believes they're in the right, or moral, or there's a certain amount of virtue signaling. But what is virtue? You want to be virtuous, and so right or wrong, people have a notion of wanting to do good. But what does that mean? And that's where we get back to worldview and opinion. So to start this off, and I don't want this to go too long, I did do one episode previous to this that you can go back and watch, but you don't need to. I'm going to review some of what I talked about previously in this episode. I'm going to talk about 4 worldviews, 4 major categories that every one of you fall into. You fall into one of these. Everybody watching this, all the fans of this channel, or if you're new to this, every one of you will fall into one of the 4 categories that I'm going to explain, hopefully briefly. I do have a penchant for rambling and babbling, and sometimes I think some of my tangents might be interesting to you. But without further ado, let me just... I created some simple graphics to assist, some visual aids for explaining 4 worldviews, and you will be able to, by the end of this, tell me, if you want, in the comment section, that's fine, which of these worldviews you fall into, and I'll tell you which one I fall into. Now, first of all, there are 2 major categories, and each of those major categories have 2 subcategories, which equal 4, right? 2 times 2 is 4. So the 2 major categories that all people will fall into are Christian or non-Christian. And why do I divide it that way? Well, Christianity makes certain truth claims. And those truth claims are either true or they are not. And Christianity is the world religion with the largest number of adherents. We're talking about religion. All religions purport to make truth claims. And that's what we're talking about, worldviews. What good is a worldview if it's false, right? And so Christianity being the largest singular world religion at the time, some 2.4 billion adherents, or people that would align themselves with Christianity, and those who are not. And so because there are pushing 8 billion people on the planet, something like 7.8 by now, 7.7 billion people on the planet right now, Christians are a minority of the total population. But when you divide the total population among religious views, Christianity is the single largest. So that's why I divide it this way. And I also personally am a Christian. But what does that mean, Christian? When I say 2.4 billion people adhere to Christianity, that's not exactly true. There is a very important distinction. People may say they're Christian and not actually be Christian. And so let me specify that a little further. Christian means you believe in the resurrection and the teachings of Jesus. And in 1 Corinthians 15, I believe it is, the Apostle Paul, one of the great Christian teachers, essentially says, here's the one thing you have to agree upon, otherwise your faith is in vain, that Jesus rose from the dead, that there was a resurrection. And I don't mean just rose from the dead. And I'm not going to be I guess we all preach a certain, when we talk about what we believe, it may come across as preaching. If you find yourself in the non-Christian category, bear with me. I'm not here to proselytize. Let's put it that way. I'm just here to explain what a Christian actually is. A Christian is a person that believes in the bodily resurrection of Jesus Christ, that he died and rose and never died again. In other words, that he is still alive somewhere, and that he will never die again, and that all who believe in him will one day resurrect if they die. And that's it, right? That it's not just that Jesus Christ rose bodily from the dead and will never die again, but it's all of those who believe in that fact will be like him at some point. In other words, death is a temporary state, and there will, according to Christianity, come a time when some people actually will never die. They will never have to go through that temporary state of death, that they will resurrect and live forever. That's Christianity. And then everyone that does not believe that, even if they claim to be a Christian, if they don't believe in the resurrection, that's the distinction. The resurrection is the deal breaker, or it's the non-negotiable. You cannot claim to be of a Christian worldview if you deny the resurrection. So that's how I distinguish the first separation of worldviews. There are those who believe, those who are Christian by a Christian definition, by a biblical definition, and those who are non-Christian. Now, to break those into the two subcategories in each of these, so it's 4 total. The difference, there are Christian optimists, Christian pessimists, non-Christian pessimists, and non-Christian optimists. And in the previous episode, I said, well, the pessimists, whether they're Christian or non-Christian, have certain things in common, and the people who are optimists, whether Christian or non-Christian, have certain things in common. And what do I mean by that? What do I mean by optimist and pessimist? Because you could say that all Christians are optimists because they believe they will live forever. Now, I'm focusing on worldview, and the definition of worldview that I am referring to is view of humanity. the human world, not just the planet, but human experience, your view. A dog doesn't have a worldview, right? A worldview is only something a human can have. And so, as a Christian, in one sense, all Christians are optimists that we are going to live forever in heaven, with Jesus, hallelujah. But I'm referring specifically to the human experience on the planet. And what I mean by that is the optimists believe that life on earth gets better, and the pessimists believe that life on earth gets worse over time. And specifically, let me go down each one of these. The Christian optimist is someone who believes that human progress, the progression of societies, the progression of human relationships, the progression of innovation and technology will get better and better and better until such a time as everyone believes in Christianity. Right? There's a progression, and since Christians believe their worldview is the true worldview, that eventually everyone will agree and come into agreement. And in that process of people gradually coming to agreement about the truth, that life gets better as well because of innovation. People recognizing that hate and killing each other is illogical, and that the technology that we have should only be used for good. All right, so now that means that the return of Jesus happens at a point when everybody comes to agreement. All right, that's controversial, and it's a minority viewpoint within Christendom. The Christian pessimist is the majority, I would say the majority viewpoint within Christendom, and that is life on earth is going to get worse, and it's going to get worse, and then there's this horrible thing that happens, and it's referred to as the tribulation, and that the book of Revelation prophesies the specific things that are going to happen at the pinnacle of badness, at the worst it could possibly be. And then Jesus comes and fixes everything in the blink of an eye, or not in a blink of an eye, in a 7-year span or a 3.5-year span. There's a bunch of different views within these worldviews. Now, again, I'm talking about major categories here. Everybody falls into one of these 4 categories, but each of these categories could be subdivided as well. I'm not interested in going into all those details. I'm just explaining. So the Christian pessimists believe that the world is going to hell, and there's nothing we can do about it, that it's prophesied that things are going to get bad, and you better turn or burn, right? You better turn to Jesus before it all goes to hell, or you'll be left behind, or, et cetera, et cetera. That is, I'm fairly certain, the majority view among Christians, like those who believe in the resurrection. Now, the non-Christian pessimist will look at the world. Mind you, I have at one point or another in my life been held at least 3 of these worldviews at different points. You can't hold more than one. You're in one of these camps. You can't be in more than one of these camps. And I have been in at least 3 of these camps. And the non-Christian pessimist is the camp I started out in. And just looking at, if you watch the news and read the news, it's just all bad, horrible things, from Hiroshima dropping a bomb and killing over 100,000 people in one fell swoop, to genocide, to the awful, the worst things that humans do to each other. And so I haven't done any surveys and haven't referenced any surveys, but I think the non-Christian pessimist view is also a majority among non-Christians. I'm not positive, but I'm relatively certain, because the non-Christian optimist view, I think, is a small minority. those who believe that human progress will ultimately solve everything, that human progress is on the right track, that humans actually, there are those that believe that technologically humans will arrive at a point where they can prolong life indefinitely. Now think about it. That's every one of us, every moment of every day is aimed at prolonging our lives. We eat so that we'll live. We can be gluttonous. We can eat because it's delicious, but we eat so that we can continue on. We drink water because you have to hydrate. You breathe air. You wake up in the morning and go to your job to hopefully provide for yourself and your family. Every decision you make is the continuation of life, the hope that you will continue to live. And that's innate to all of us. And there are those who are non-Christian that have this sense that they want to live forever, that they have this hope that technology will save humanity, that genetic research and development will eradicate disease. And there's some truth to this. The study of the DNA molecule and mapping the genome, the human genome, was a major project, and being able to isolate where certain maladies, mutations, sickness, tendencies are located on the DNA strand. That's incredible research, and I believe it's good research. And there's plenty of ethical questions about whether you should genetically modify fetuses or embryos. And I won't go into that. Maybe sometime we'll discuss that on this channel. But where do you fall? You have already figured it out. I'm sure there's plenty of you. Well, I don't know. And you can, right now in the comment section, we'll press like and share and subscribe. But in the comment section, if you want, tell me where you are. Christian optimist, Christian pessimist, non-Christian pessimist, non-Christian optimist. You don't have to. I won't. If that's something you want to declare publicly, where I stand, okay, I already said is I started out as a non-Christian pessimist, and then I moved to a Christian pessimist, and I currently stand as a Christian optimist. And that's all I have to say about that. What I did say in the previous episode is that I would talk a little bit about pollution. All right, because if we're talking about saving the world, one of the popular beliefs is that humans are destroying the planet, that humans are potentially irreversibly damaging our habitat, the only place that we can exist, the only place that we can live in this universe, that we are damaging it beyond repair. Probably in the next episode, I'll go into more of this, but I'll just make a few comments here before signing off. Number one, I'm going to shift to the weather. Oh no, it's not what I wanted to do. So you can view. I'll figure it out next time. Oh, is this it? Yeah, there it is. You can look. So, just wanted to turn on the weather. So, the North Pole and the South Pole are the polar ice caps. And one of the phrases that's used is global warming, and another expression that's used is climate change. All right, and so one of the big debates is human development, ingenuity, technology pumping CO2 into the atmosphere at such a rate that it will irreversibly, dramatically alter the global environment in a negative way that will damage or harm humanity or even bring about extinction. That's pretty much, it's as much a political view as it is an ecological view. And so I have a friend who's an astrophysicist. I'm actually doing a podcast with him. We haven't posted it yet, but we've got about 12 weeks of content already recorded. And I asked him a question. I said, what if the polar ice caps melted? Because that's the fear, that the greenhouse gases will heat up the planet so that the polar ice caps will melt and that sea levels will rise. And I said, well, if both polar ice caps completely melted, what would be the result? How high would the sea levels rise? And he said, oh, there's been many times in the history of the planet when there were no polar ice caps. That was his first statement. Oh, there's been many times over the history of our planet when there were no polar ice caps. So, oh, that's interesting. And he said the sea levels globally would rise on average. I think he was spitballing this because I've heard a different estimate, but on average, he said sea levels would rise about 7 feet globally. Have you ever been to the beach? Depending on which beach you've been to, 7 feet is not very far up the shoreline, right? 7 feet. In some very flat beaches, it might completely consume all the sand, but there's plenty of beaches that are very steep. 7 feet globally is not that high, but certainly there would be islands that would disappear, but it would be a gradual rising of sea levels. Okay, it's not, and so other things that would happen is there would be more water and just slightly less land space. So the map wouldn't look that much different. And there would be more green. Places now that are frozen would be green and arable and farmable. And temperatures around the equator would go up. Temperatures everywhere would go up. And the colder climates would get, nicer. So what I'm saying is global warming and melting of polar ice caps are not the end of the world at all. That's all I'm going to say. So subscribe and share. And next week I'll talk a little bit more about the climate stuff. But I'm going to talk about why I think the future is bright and why I am an optimist.